I would invite Nathalie to give us a presentation about the Silent Room, kind of larger history of this project. And yeah, and so we'll speak for maybe about half an hour, 40 minutes tops, and have a discussion.
Hi, thank you so much, Gascia, for the invitation, and it's been a wonderful collaboration with Jaya and with everyone. And I think some of you were here before, so you've heard me, but I'm going to repeat the same thing. So this project started 7 years ago, and this is the 4th iteration of the project. This, I think, it's a bit of a variation. So I started the first Silent Room in Beirut in 2017, and I just have to give a bit of a background on why I started this project and how it evolved. So I grew up in Beirut, and I was born 2 years after the beginning of civil war, and I've been living through different kind of different periods of conflict. So whether it is civil war or Syrian occupation or war with Israel, or bombed periods of random bombed cars in the city. To the latest explosion, like one of the largest explosions in the world. I've experienced the city through this frame, actually, this very unstable frame, and I've experienced different forms of shelter. And the shelter, whether it is a formal shelter, so like the bunker in the basement of a building, or the informal shelter, so that would be like the bathroom of a bedroom, or anything that would be safe in the space you are. But it's also like, for me, the notion of shelter and safety is also experienced in being away from home, like running away and being like somewhere else. But also it's a play, like, I mean, also when we were kids, we played shelter between, like the rocks on the beach, in the void, in the crevices, in between, rocks. So somewhere in 2016, I think we were still, we were always discussing: is the war over? Is it over? I mean, the civil war was officially over in 1990, but then we always felt in a state of war. And then I just thought, no, it is not. We all thought it's not actually over. It keeps on manifesting in different forms. So. There was another crisis that happened. It was the garbage crisis, and at this point, it was very difficult to live in the city. But there was another sense that was hijacked, and it was the olfactory sound, like smelling, but also breathing. So at this point, I really started thinking of what would be the shelter, and what would be a shelter for people who spend most of their time on the street. So I don't know, like vendors, like across shops on the street. And I started thinking of a space that one can access that is outside of your home, but that could be safe. I was also, at the time, I had also moved to London, and I was, like also a lot on my phone, and I think, like also what I could feel was very aggressive was this influx of information that kind of normalizes things, or it stabilizes. No, it doesn't stabilize them, it just equalizes them. Everything has the same value. It normalizes things, and then you kind of live through trauma with it being normalized. So I felt I was living in a constant state of fear. And so I just thought that a contemporary shelter for me would be a space where like all the senses are given a rest. And you can have, like rest from information, and just a place to be without performance, without productivity, and without intrusion of information. So I started to think of this space that would be acoustically isolated with really minimal information on the inside, just, upholstered walls with fabric that would be a bit like, that would reproduce a bit the gesture of, like being covered with a blanket. And with with the sound designer at that time, we wondered what would be the sound of this space, and because it was important that there would be a sound, not to create these isolated spaces, but to, so the idea was to record the sound of the city between 3 and 5 in the morning, so the city at its quietest hours. Because it was very important to bring in already this notion of being part of the city, tuning to it rather than escaping it. But it was important that it would be outside. So we did the first one in Beirut. We put it, like in between, on the crossroad almost of two neighborhoods, one that is industrial, one that is low income, and a highway. And again, I mean, like I said last time, I was, like while I was doing it, I was just thinking, like I'm not an architect, I'm not an urbanist. How do while building it, it's very pretentious, like to think I have a solution, or I can pretend this is a shelter. But then the response was really, it was really incredible. I mean, people felt very protected and safe, and they would just wonder, why doesn't it exist? So I got a little bit more encouraged to continue this project and to think, that maybe, possibly, if I accumulate them, then I can, like have some how do you say, arguments to make it more permanent. So we've done one in, oh, sorry, I should be moving.
That was the first one.
That was the first one. So yeah, as you can see, basically, like you go up sorry, I'm going back. So you go up the stairs and then you go inside, and this is what would happen on the inside, or nothing would happen on the inside. It would just be a simple space where you could just rest. And then we did another one that was a response to the London environment. So it was almost the same space, but kind of reduced, and you have the same experience. And also, like, it's very important for me that you don't see the inside, you don't see the interior, because it's not very interesting, and it should not be very interesting. It's just a place of rest. And then this could be my favorite version. This one, we were invited by the UNESCO Week of Sound to do an iteration in Beirut, and here we were proposed different sites, and we were proposed a bakery. This is a bakery that used to sell bread during the Civil War. It was one of the few bakeries that was open. And then, like, things changed, and, like, life went on, and when we would go out and come back at 5 in the morning when we were 16, this is where we would go for, food at 6 in the morning. So it was disused, and we basically integrated the Silent Room again, with this configuration, the same one that you saw in the pink one, we just created the same configuration inside. Then I was invited to do another one in the desert, and here, I mean, it's obviously less of a notion of a shelter, it's more, it's more luscious, but it was an interesting way of transiting in sound, actually, because here the environment was very quiet, so there was no need to protect yourself or mute the city or mute the environment. But we started with Yumna Saba, the musicologist and sound and artist. We started recording the inaudible sounds, what you don't hear. So like the sound in the crevices of the walls, or in the water pathways, or under the sand. And we diffused this, but it was a way also to, again, attune with your environment and create this frame for listening and hearing. And then I was invited to do this version that you see by Gascia. I'm so sorry. She hasn't corrected me on me telling her name wrong for 5 years.
Until today.
So at this point, I was starting to think. I was starting to think a little bit more of making it more bare, making it more simple, making it more essential. And I was interested in the tent format and form and kind of not architecture, but the typology of the tent as a form of refuge from the environment, as a form, but also as a form of play, and again, obviously that cannot be ignored, you know, as a form of habitat for displacement, but also homelessness. But yes, so I was interested with this kind of shape, and then I was in a residency in Brazil earlier this year, and there, I mean, the sound is really not something you want to put outside because you'd be missing out on the whole Brazilian experience. And I was there during Carnival, so I mean, music is also resistance and it's very political. And I mean, if you go to sleep, you know, like still until 5 in the morning, you just hear the city, you know, like vibrating to the sounds that are everywhere, because you know, like there are these, I forgot the names, you know, like the blocos that happen everywhere in the city. But I was in the forest, I was in a coffee plantation, and we met, I mean, these different people, and then this woman who was from there started the workshop in bamboo. So I joined the workshop, and I just thought I could do it with bamboo, just this, you know, it's just a simple act of going, you know, like picking it up, you know, cutting it, building, and then even, you know, like if it's left behind, you know, like it's not, we're not majorly like creating waste, because this also became a concern. How can I create these structures and intervene without creating waste, and how can I make them permanent? And I also thought, you know, maybe the permanency can come through the fact that it's transitory, but I can take it everywhere. So, yeah, this was while making. So yeah, we came to this format that is a tent, but also a blanket. That is very easily transportable. I mean, it came. I brought the tent in my suitcase from Beirut. And again, there is this quality of being handmade, because we did it, you know, handmade, you know, with lots of details, with sewn borders on them. And yeah, we just built it with ropes. I mean, I went to Tuscany also to do a workshop, but it was hyper complicated, too engineered. So we just went back, you know, like to doing it with ropes. And that's it. I mean, we got to this shape, and I just, you know, like to show this image because this was on next day, like the day I just put this, the final polycarbonate on it, and before going to this idea, I just talk also about, you know, like how we collaborated also with Gerard. Like it was very clear that this silent room would be about movement and displacement and travel whether it is whether you're traveling willingly or you're being displaced. So the idea was that he would work on these ideas, but then he can talk all about his work, because collaboration are always very, I mean, it's an open conversation, but then it's also like people just do their they just bring in their view on it. So the last thing I just want to say, I mean, this is what I've experienced also while making it, is with the other ones, where I had collaborated with architects who had their own practice. They were very concerned with the outside, with the shape, with the form, with how shiny it could be or interesting. I mean, it was interesting shapes, and I willingly wanted it to be that, because I just wanted to bring the importance to the subject, you know, get the attention. And I would always, you know, like ask them, can you please just concentrate on the inside? I mean, all the rest is an envelope. And then with this one, all I was, you know, like I was not so concerned with, you know, like muting the sound, and I was not so concerned with, I wasn't that concerned with that. I was just concerned with closing it off and keep it almost as a sculpture or something like an interrogation point in space. Because another very important thing happened also in this 7 years timeline is the day we were launching this on social media. It was the day after the tent massacre happened in Rafah, and I just felt I could not get myself to share this image about the tent and share this workshop that would explore what is a safe sound when there are people actually living in tents and who were bombed actually, and the sound, they could not even be sheltered by by any surface, like the only surface between them and an explosion is a piece of fabric. So this is it, but then this came here, and it's not because this happens that we should not continue questioning how would this operate. But yes, I think, you know, like this project is for me an interrogation on the notion of refuge, who has access to it, and yeah, and how I can, I don't know, just make it. I think how I can process the trauma of yeah, the trauma of the war.
Thank you so much, Nellie.